Up next, we focus on the markets this week, diving deep into the cattle markets. Darrell Peel with Oklahoma State University joined me on Wednesday to discuss what's been happening in the cattle markets. What do you think is the biggest driver behind this strength right now, and realistically, how long can we have this last?
Yeah, without a doubt, the main driver in this situation right now is the supply side. The big picture is, of course, we've got cow numbers at multi-decade lows. We're smaller than we intended to be, and the market is trying to, position or provide incentives, if you will, for producers to rebuild, and that speaks then to that speaks to where we're going to go from here and so on, and that is that we have very little indication yet that we've even started that process of herd rebuilding. We got to save some heifers. That heifer retention will come at the expense of feeder supplies, which are already tight. So all of that speaks to the idea that even though these markets are remarkably strong, they've continued to move higher, we still have some strength ahead of us as we squeeze supplies and ultimately beef production down here for an extended period of time.
I think it was back in February, Darrell, you wrote about that process of rebuilding the beef cow herd, some of the challenges that come along with that, as you just referenced. But why do you think we are slow at this point here in 2025's version of the cattle markets to rebuild that herd based on the data we've seen coming out from USDA?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of factors. It's not just one thing. It's really, the culmination of a whole list of things. Obviously, drought is what got us here, and lingering drought threats has been one of the reasons producers have been pretty cautious, pretty slow to be aggressive about trying to restock. And then when you throw onto that some financial considerations, obviously we've got a fairly expensive process here in terms of interest rates and where we're at with prices these days. So producers are taking it cautiously, bankers are taking it cautiously. And then, there's other things. There's the age demographics of producers, which implies that a lot of these guys are probably thinking about transition at this point. And so when you put all that together, it spells out a fairly slow process that's really in pretty big contrast to what happened about a decade ago when we came out of the low in 2014.
Good point. Well, as you and I are sitting here middle of the week having our conversation on Wednesday, there's a couple of factors out there influencing the cattle market. One of them has to do with Mexico and the New World Screwworm. Over the weekend, Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins came out with an announcement on there, kind of tightening the screw a little bit on Mexico, calling for them to act on what Rollins would like to see. Do you think this news, if we do see feeder cattle imports being limited again, could that impact prices here in the U.S.?
Well, certainly, in the big picture, any reduction in supplies is going to be a positive factor from the standpoint of tight supplies. I don't think it's enough numbers that we would really be able to detect a lot of impact. Obviously, it would depend on how long it lasts as well. But the numbers we're talking about here, and even in general, the numbers of cattle we get from Mexico are not huge numbers. If it went on for a whole year, that would be enough to have an impact. But if it's just a few weeks, which it probably would be, then I wouldn't expect that by itself to be a major market mover.
I want to squeeze in a viewer question we got in over the weekend as well, Darrell. They were asking about the price for cull cattle. Have you been able to track any metrics on that front?
Yeah, in fact, these cull cow prices are just phenomenal. In Oklahoma, for example, the last week, average kind of boning cull cows were bringing very close to $1.50 a pound. The breaking cows, the younger cows that would be a little fleshier and dress a little better, some of them were bringing up, I think it was $1.54 or 58. So we're seeing extremely strong prices for these cull cows. You multiply that out times the weight of these cows, we're talking $2,000 for a cull cow at this point.
It's hard to wrap my mind around, that's for sure, Darrell. Before I let you go, besides drought, what else could slow the herd rebuilding process over the next 2-3 years?
Well, right now we're just dealing with a lot of broad-based uncertainty in the general economy. There's a lot of political stuff flying around. And that uncertainty is affecting many markets, virtually all markets at this point. That's not really changing the overall cattle market trajectory, if you will, at this point. If it were to turn worse in terms of a macroeconomic issue, that would be a problem. But other than that, I think it's a slow grind. Now, we do have some slight indications that maybe we're beginning some heifer retention. The only real data we have at this point was the last The April cattle on feed report contained a quarterly breakdown of steers and heifers on feed, and that showed heifers as a percentage of the on-feed inventory to be the lowest in about 5 years. So maybe that thing's beginning to come down. It's not at a level yet that would confirm that we're retaining heifers and rebuilding the herd, but we're moving in the right direction. And of course, cow culling has also been dropping the last year or so. So if those two things move in the same direction and kind of reinforce each other, we might begin the process of herd rebuilding maybe later in the year.
We'll keep an eye on that. I teased that was going to be my last question a second ago, but I thought of another one I wanted to get to, Darrell. Obviously, I'm joining you from Nebraska right now. May 1st to May 10th, as we proceed through the month, is kind of what folks will think about turning out to their summer pastures. Give me an update on how that is going down in Oklahoma, as well as your drought situation.
Yeah, I tell you what, April turned out to be a very wet month in Oklahoma. We've had continuous rains, or several rounds of rains, I should say, that have been extremely beneficial. So, you know, we're off to a really good start at this point for pasture and hay production. And that's great news, because if you get April and May and June, then even if it turns dry later in the summer, as it often does, even without a pronounced drought, you can kind of get through that if you've made forage early in the year. So I would say at this point we're in pretty good shape.